I know it's late, but I just need to whine and complain and rant about a movie I just saw really quickly. You know how much I love bad movies that are so bad that they're good. I think it's the most fun you can have is getting together with friends and watching absolutely atrocious movies or shows that you can laugh at and make fun of together. And there was a new banger, or so I thought, that was coming out called Pope's Exorcist. This is Russell Crowe as what I thought would be like a John Wick of exorcists, going out there and just slapping demons around, like actually kung fuing them and like overpowering them, fist fighting. Like that's the impression I got from the trailer. I thought it was gonna be like absolutely wild and nutty. And I just came back from the theater after seeing it, and my God, there's just a lot that I need to talk about in terms of disappointment and bewilderment that this movie even got made in the first place. So I'm going to treat this like a little confessional here and own up to some sins. Seeing this was a sin. And I understand the Lord forgives all sins, but I feel like after he takes a peek at the Rotten Tomatoes 83% audience score, he's going to flood the earth again out of pure embarrassment for even making our species. This movie is so far from an 83%, it's laughable. It is not good by any means. I don't know why the audience score is so high. Like, it is guilty of more sins than any of the demons in the film. Well, even though there's only one main demon. It is the most generic horror schlock of all time. But its biggest crime is being boring. It borrows every single generic horror plot point, every generic horror movie cliche of like, you know, sitting up from the bed like the Undertaker because the child's possessed and he has like a deep demony voice. Every single like horror movie trope is just ham-fisted into this. All of it dumped into this witch's cauldron and brewed into a disgusting stew. Like, it is not even done in a fun way. There's nothing creative or enjoyable about it. It's boring mostly, though there are some fun moments, like fun bad moments that I'll talk about. But overall, I am just blown away by how uninteresting the film was after seeing the trailer. The trailer got me hype. I knew this wasn't going to be a good movie. I don't feel like anyone with a working pair of eyes would watch the trailer for The Pope's Exorcist and be like, wow, that might be pretty damn good. Like, that was never a thought that crossed anyone's mind, I doubt. But I as well as many others, I imagine, were under the impression like, wow, this will be like entertainingly silly. But it really wasn't. It didn't even try to be scary, first of all. Like, that was the wildest thing to me. It really didn't even try to be a horror movie. Its scares mainly consisted of the standard lift people up using, you know, Jedi force powers and throw them around a room, or knock over a couple of crosses. Well, and I guess there is, of course, the cliche of, like, bone snapping, walking on all fours. But past that, it doesn't even really try to build tension. There's not even jump scares, which is like the easiest slam dunk for horror films where they could just throw in a bunch of jump scares and people are like, oh my god, it was horrifying. But it didn't even bother with that. It just does nothing. It's just so bland. It's just an empty calorie of a film. I did something I very rarely do. I took notes during this film because I was so dumbfounded by what I was watching. So I'm just going to go over it start to finish. There will be spoilers. There's a lot I want to talk about. So Russell Crowe hops back in the saddle here, dusting off the acting chops to tackle the lead role of a powerful exorcist named Gabriele Amorth. And the film opens with him performing an exorcist on a guy who's struggling with the devil coming over him. So he's bouncing around the bed all crazy like a toddler going through a sugar rush. And Gabriele's asking him questions like a little interrogation, you know, what's my name? What do you want? Who are you? You're Satan, aren't you? You're Satan. And then he's like, yeah, I'm Satan. I'll possess anyone. I know everything. And then Gabriele's master plan is he brings in a pig and he's like, I don't believe you. You're not Satan. If you were Satan, you could possess this pig. And he's like, yeah, I could possess that pig. I could fucking possess him. Watch me possess that pig. And Gabriele's like, do it. Possess that pig. So then he does, and then the guy is back to normal. And then once the Satan is inside the pig, they just blast the pig's head off with a shotgun. Which honestly set the bar pretty high immediately, because I was like, okay, that was fun, silly, bad. He just literally did, like, fucking middle school reverse psychology on Satan. What a fucking buffoon to fall for that one, the oldest trick in the book. It's then explained a few scenes later that this wasn't a real possession, this was mental illness, and Gabriele was just doing a bit of theater. But he really did just execute that pig right in front of that guy. in order to convince him that the demon was no longer there. And because he executed that pig, he then had to go through like a religious legal proceeding where he stood trial with these other bishops that were like, this is unnecessary. You're performing exorcists. It's not, there's no such thing as this evil, you know, we don't need this kind of big exorcist position anymore. You're out of line, Gabriele. We don't really need you anymore. So Gabriele is like, you guys don't know what real evil is. Even if 98% of them are like mental illness and not real possession, there's still 2% that's just pure evil and you need me. So then he walks out, but not before making a goofy noise. So as he turns his back to him, and it turns out Gabriele was also like a lawyer at one point or something, I believe he mentioned. So this was actually like a Saul Goodman moment where he was just like defending himself in religious court. And it ultimately ends with them being like, yeah, we don't really need you. So Gabriele storms off, and then as he's about to exit the door, he goes, woo for no fucking reason. Because it was something he did earlier to a group of like nuns that walked by him. I guess that was like a catchphrase they tried, or like a calling card they tried to use for the very beginning of the film and then forgot about it because he never does it again after these two scenes. But there's a group of nuns that walk by him and he goes, like literally blowing raspberries at them, and they giggle and walk by. So then he does it again after that whole religious legal proceeding. And he drops it after that. But it started fun bad. It was like, oh, this is super silly, but it seems almost self-aware and I'm having fun. But then it totally loses all of that charm. The core part of the movie then unfolds where a family just went through a loss with their father and a woman's husband passing away. And the only thing they have left is this giant estate, this holy ground that they're getting like renovations done to. So there's a ton of workers, and they end up unearthing something unholy. Now, before getting to that, the family is as cookie cutter as it gets. The mom's, you know, strong on her own. She's mentally sound, like she's doing everything she can for her children. They mean the world to her. The daughter is a rebellious teen who, I'm not exaggerating, first thing when she gets in the house is goes up to one of the workers, grabs a cigarette, asks for the light, gets a light with the cigarette, then sits on the balcony over the front porch, and the mom's like, put that cigarette out, what are you doing? And she's like, ugh! And then walks off, storms off, mad at her mom. So this was as cliche as it gets with a teenage girl and teenage angst. And then, of course, she's always listening to, like, loud music and hates her mom. Like, oh, Mom, you're being such a square. Get out of my room, Mom. I'm busy listening to music. So that's her whole character, which means nothing because after, like, 10 minutes, none of this shit matters. But that's her, and then they also have a son, a younger brother. He's like 12 or something, I don't really know. But he's traumatized because he watched their dad die. So it wasn't like some kind of normal passing or anything. It was some kind of car accident that wasn't fully explained, but he ended up getting impaled through the head, and the son sat there and watched it. So he was traumatized from it and refused to talk. Now, after all of this is established over the course of like a 5-minute speed run of getting across the most two-dimensional characters of all time, that child is exploring the house, and he goes into the basement and he sees like this glory hole, and he takes a peek through it, and there's like a door with symbols on it, and it ends up kind of possessing him. It sinks its fangs into him. This is how the demon gets in. He literally comes in through the fucking glory hole in the basement. So the child ends up immediately getting possessed within the first couple of minutes of being there. And then some of the workers go into the basement, and they also notice the glory hole. They're like, oh man, this is absolutely absurd. Is there no decency? Where's the class? So they're peeking through the glory hole, and one of them lights a flare and was going to put the flare through the glory hole, but it ends up turning into a flamethrower and cremating them, which scares off all the other workers. So then all the other workers leave, and then it's just the family left in the house with their child who is now possessed. Everything I've explained right now happens almost instantly. Like, all of this was so quick, there was no build up to any of it, no tension at all. It was done as quickly as possible to get to, like, I guess what they deemed to be the scary parts, with the child having, like, a demon voice and saying crude, creepy things. But anyway, after the possession, the Vatican gets word about this, and then they send Gabriele out there, like, Gabriele, I've got real scary stuff happening at this location. He's like, I'm on it, Chief. You know, give me my badge and my gun, I'm going in. So Gabriele is then sent there like some kind of fucking religious assassin to take down a demon. And I really thought he was gonna roll up in like some kind of Justice League jet, like or something right out of the X-Men where they have like crazy fucking jet. I thought he was gonna fly in on some high-tech shit, but then he rolls up in a moped. So he just kind of scoots on in on his moped, shows up to the house in order to start attacking the demon. And the demon, which is possessing the boy, is a real wacko. Like, this guy's a goofball. So before Gabriele gets there, like right before he gets there, the mom notices something's wrong with the child. He's kind of bedridden and he looks pale. And then he starts talking in a not really deep voice, but you know that like goofy voice you'd make as a child growing up, like the like that kind of shit where you like vocal fry yourself and then try and make it deeper. That's the voice, the very cliche horror movie demon voice. And the mom then hugs the child in order to like, you know, calm him down. And while that's happening, she looks down and it turns out the child is squeezing her titty. And then she's like, oh, goodness gracious. And he's like, you didn't breastfeed me enough, mommy. I shit you not. That is what he says. And she's like, oh God. And she like covers herself up even more. And then he starts laughing about like squeezing her tit. And then he says, bring me the priest. So they brought in a priest that wasn't Gabriele first. His name was Thomas, and it was a bigger mismatch than when Krillin tried to fight Frieza. Thomas shows up and immediately gets fucking ragdolled by that demon. He gets thrown out of the room and he's like, good heavens, this is a little much for me. We're gonna need the big guns. So he leaves and then Gabriele shows up. So then it's the two of them and they try to tag team the demon in order to, you know, solve this situation. So Gabriele gets in there and he starts his interrogation. And the demon immediately showcases that he's more powerful than all the other ones Gabriele's seen because he knocks a cross off the wall. Like, I'm so tired of seeing that in horror movies where, like, this really powerful demon can only do, like, a couple of trivial things like blow over a vase or move a chair slightly or throw a bucket of dirt against a wall. It's like, who cares? It's not intimidating. That's fucking embarrassing. But Gabriele's like, oh, jeepers creepers. And then he's like, what's my name? And the demon gets it right. He's like, you're Gabriele Amorth. Then he gets blasted with memories from his past, sins that he hasn't fully forgiven himself for. So there's like a moment where he's in a war, and then there's like a lady, and then the demon pukes up a bird, and then Gabriele's like, oh, I'm out of here. So then he fucking waddles out of the room, goes up to the other priest, Thomas, and he's like, okay, that guy means business. So then he instructs Thomas to confess his sins to him so they can't be used against him when they go, you know, talk to the demon again. So Thomas is like, all right, it's been 8 months since I went to confession. And he starts to confess his sins. And Gabriele's like, 8 months? Okay, this is going to take too long. He's like, okay, Lord, all of his sins are forgiven. He's very sorry, trust me. So he literally uses a cheat code to forgive his sins on behalf of God, which I thought was like almost disrespectful. It's like, what the fuck? Can you do that? Like, are you allowed to do that? Like, do you have the power to just say, like, all of his sins are forgiven without him actually confessing it? It's like, damn, that was weird. He had no interest at all in hearing, like, the sins he was going to confess to. He's just like, yeah, whatever, you're fucking good. Literally just gives him the stamp of approval, and he's like, all right, time to go. And when they get into the room, unsurprisingly, the first thing the demon does is show Thomas his sins that he has clearly not been absolved of. It looks like Gabriele didn't have the authority to do that, so he immediately just gets blasted with his sins, and the demon calls him Panty Sniffer. He says that he fucks the daughters of members of his congregation. And then this makes Thomas very upset that he'd mentioned that. So Thomas goes over to him, the child that's possessed by the demon, and two hands strangles him and shakes him like Homer Simpson strangling Bart. It was so goofy. And Gabriele's like, please, Thomas, no, don't do it. That's what he wants. As the child's like, getting fucking strangled by Thomas. That was a good fucking silly scene. But after that, then the demon laughs and then he targets Gabriele. And he's like, you know what I want to do, Gabriele? I want to fuck you. I want to fuck you so hard that when you start coming, you're going to feel ashamed by the release. I'm not kidding. That was his statement. Like, when asked about his main goal, it was to fuck Gabriele. And not, like, in a literal sense, to fuck Gabriele, at least from the way he was speaking about it. Which was jarring to hear that. It was so weird. It was so fucking weird. And then they start trying to get, like, the religious artifacts out on him, like, the power of Christ compels you type shit. And it's not working. The demon then turns off the lights, which for some reason makes them stop immediately. And I'm kind of just giving you like an overall plot summary of everything that happens here, but I want to stress, and I can't stress enough, how there is at no point any attempt to even build tension or show you unnerving things or make anything scary. It's like AI generated a script of a horror film without figuring out how to execute on the scares that they're copying from all of the horror films before it. Like, it is so bland. But anyway, after the lights go out, Gabriele and Thomas split up. Gabriele then goes outside and notices that there's a seal of the Vatican on like a well. So he ties a rope to the top of the well and then his moped and drives it, and then, which, you know, takes the lid off the well. Thomas is still inside, posted up, making sure like the demon child's not up to any silly stuff, any fishy business. But then things start popping off. The mom has like a giant arm come over her while she's sleeping, and I don't even know how she's able to even like fucking find the time to go to sleep with the demon child always yelling and screaming and like throwing things around the room. Well, that's an exaggeration. Knocking things around the room lightly. But she's like in bed trying to sleep, and then a giant hand comes over her face and drags her into the mattress slowly. And then the daughter, who's in her rebellious stage, is trapped in a closet with like a bunch of like scratches going across the wood next to her. And Thomas is there, and he, you know, approaches the demon about it, like, "Stop it, demon." And then the demon bites his ear, like full-blown Mike Tyson bites a piece of his ear, and Thomas is like, "Oh my, you didn't just do that." Like, he didn't yell or scream or anything. He gets his ear bitten off, and he just looks more like inconvenienced than anything. He's like, "Ugh, there goes a piece of my ear, zoinks, god damn it." And then he just like walks back out. So Gabriele then realizes that there's a lot more at play here than they originally thought. There's a bigger mystery afoot now that he's opened this well, and he sees a bunch of like skeletons, and then he drops a piece of fire paper in there to see how deep the well goes, which of course causes it to erupt like a goddamn volcano again, just like what happened with the glory hole. And then Gabriele rushes back in, sees all the chaos. He pulls the mom out from the bed, and then he opens the closet door where the daughter was getting attacked by little scratches, and he's like, "This is not a good place to do that, so please stop. Cease that foolishness." And the demon stops, and then the girl leaves the closet. And then we have the most generic plot device when it comes to horror films ever. Gabriele reveals that all they need to do in order to save the day is learn the demon's name. This is something that has been used in every fucking horror movie that deals with demons or possession since the beginning of fucking time. It is so lazy and boring, but that's the major plot point. It's them then needing to find out what the demon's name is. So they start exploring. They also confront the demon again, who reveals what his real plot was: to possess Gabriele. He didn't want to just possess the family, he wanted Gabriele. So they're exploring the premises. They eventually find that glory hole, and they bust it open. They go inside the area. Turns out it's a catacombs where there's a bunch of these skeletons all over the place. And then while this is happening, the like super high tier bishop, like max level bishop that sent Gabriele here in the first place, then starts having a panic attack. He's like, "It's worse than we thought." He read like a letter or something from like a book of reports that they keep getting about the situation. He's like, "Oh my goodness." So he starts freaking out. He's like, "Ah!" And then he has like a little mini heart attack. He ends up in the hospital. And as they're exploring the catacombs, they're learning like, wow, this dates back like fucking 400 years ago. Like, this demon's been around for a long time, and the Vatican tried to seal it off and cover it up. And then while that's going on, the priest is laying, like the high bishop is laying in bed, surrounded by some of the priests that were part of like the religious legal proceeding. And then he pulls off his oxygen mask and just pukes up blood on one of them. So I guess he was starting to get like possessed too to some level, or he was really just stressed out about the situation. But they eventually find this almost ritualistic chamber. I can't remember exactly what it was for, but it has like a torture device in there. It also then has like what was a very strong priest back in the day on like a throne, and they read his diary. And in that diary, they learn the demon's name. It's Asmodeus. And he can possess a lot of different people. He's like a fucking puppet master. And Aaron, I saw this with Aaron as well as Ridley, Eli, and Tiana. Aaron made a great point. If the whole thing is you only need the demon's name in order to win, that super strong priest must have been really lacking. Like, he must have been fucking overdosing on Xanax or something and really dropped the ball because he literally had Asmodeus' name not only written down in the diary or written down in the book, but had a full fucking picture, hand-drawn painting with like a stylized Asmodeus name under there. So like the name was readily available and was still unsuccessful in the exorcism and saving the day. So that guy must have fucking sucked. He must have been terrible at his job. So they learned the demon's name is Asmodeus. As they learn that, one of the other priests that was really mean to Gabriele walks through and sees that the Lord on the crucifix is bleeding a little bit, and he's like, no! And then he takes a sabbatical and leaves for some reason. So now they have the demon's name. They then confront the demon. They're trying to, like, win. But the demon, starts possessing the daughter. He still has the son. He's like writing things on his chest like, God isn't here. God is not welcome. No God allowed. This is a demons only club. And he's like, strangling someone with Thomas with his tie. The demon girl that he's now possessed is like slapping the mom around. And then Gabriele, in order to stop the madness, is like, all right, fine, just possess me. So he does. Asmodeus then possesses Gabriele. His plan was to infiltrate the Vatican in order to cause mayhem and wreak havoc. And so he goes downstairs into the throne room and he grabs a giant scepter, and Thomas walks in like the fucking action movie hero. And then he sees the girl that he fucked from the congregation. She's got like her titties out and shit and starts fighting. They get into a fist fight. She's covered in blood. Gabriele is still trying to fight back against Asmodeus, but it's not winning. Thomas then has like this little coin or something that he pushes on the forehead of the girl, which blows her up, literally insta-gibs her like it's Team Fortress 2. And then Gabriele's in like a one-on-one battle with the demon. I also totally forgot a core component here because I'm getting lost in the sauce explaining it. But one of Gabriele's big sins that the demon keeps showing him is a long time ago there was a lady who they thought was possessed. Gabriele went there and learned it wasn't a possession, it was a mental illness. She was just talking about like sexual abuse, trauma and stuff, and Gabriele's like, I'm not really equipped to handle that. And then she bit the head off of a bird in front of him, and he's like, yeah, this is just mental illness. And then she ends up killing herself right in front of him, and Gabriele feels immense regret for not helping her and working on the mental health side of exorcisms. So that's why he swore to like do that from that point forward, but he never forgave himself. So the demon's showing him that, and then after Thomas blows up that girl, they also, the sound effect they used for the blowing up was fucking fantastic. I'm actually pretty sure it came straight from Counter-Strike after you armed the bomb. It sounded outrageous. So after that, Gabriele is wrestling with that girl, shaking her around, and then Thomas throws him like a powerful religious artifact, and he fucking sticks it on her head, throws her into like this pit of water, and then starts reading the demon's name to it and vanquishing it to hell, and saves the day. Family's safe, demons back in hell, and then we have the ending of the film, which once again brought it back to a silly bad state, where the high bishop that puked blood, I guess, is totally fine now. Maybe that's just something he does when he's stressed out, I guess, but like he wasn't even possessed or anything. He's just like totally fucking fine. The other priest that took a sabbatical gets replaced, and then they bring in Thomas and Gabriele, and they're like, yeah, this was a serious situation, but it's 1 of 200. You've only solved 1 out of 200. There's still 199 more to go. Are you willing to take up the task? Like actual Marvel Avengers, Nick Fury recruiting them level shit. And Thomas is like, let's get to business. And Gabriele reaches back for a handshake and says, let's go to hell. And that's where it ends. Literally setting it up for sequels, like a fucking Men in Black style universe for this, where they're just going to different places and performing exorcisms. So that was the whole film in a nutshell. The reason I wanted to explain all of it is because explaining it makes it sound far more fun shitty than it is. Everything I explained in theory is fun bad, but in execution is fucking awful. I don't really know what the purpose of this movie was, because like I said, it doesn't even really try to be scary or unnerving. It's actually just kind of a genuine waste of time. There are entertaining moments, like I said, there are times where it is goofy, fun, bad, but that's not the overall experience with the film. Like, there were times where we laughed at the silliness, but most of the time it was just sitting there in silence, wasting time watching it. It just didn't do anything in general. Like, it just didn't do anything. It was just kind of a fucking mess of a film where it had like DNA of all of the horror films before it, but didn't even bother to execute it in any meaningful way. It didn't even try. Like, it literally feels like they didn't try at all. That just they had some kind of contractual obligation to fulfill, so they just fucking pooped this out as quickly as possible. It really seemed like it was very rushed. But yeah, I wanted to talk about it because I was very excited to see this movie. I've talked about it on stream a few times about how like I'm really confident that this will be a fun bad movie, and I was just wrong. It really wasn't fun bad at all. So yeah, I just kind of want to talk about it a little bit and rant. That's about it. So yeah.